perhaps it's fitting that on a street named after the architect of Nebraska's unicameral system, Senator George Norris, sits a house designed by a man whose name is synonymous with modern architecture, Frank Lloyd Wright. Located in McCook, it is the first and only building in Nebraska designed by the famous architect. It's over 100 years old and known by the name of the couple who built it, Harvey and Elizabeth Sutton. In the 1880s, Harvey Sutton was a musician in the Sells Brothers Circus Band. The circus traveled the nation and made stops in Nebraska. According to Sutton family history, Harvey left the band to live in Ainsworth and married a local girl, Elizabeth Munson, in 1886. He began a new career as a jeweler and also formed the Sutton Band. Harvey's band became so popular, it caught the attention of some McCook community members.
They recruited him from Ainsworth, got him down there to lead the band and build the jewelry store, and he led the Burlington Band.
Which was a big deal on the Burlington Railroad. He was also the head timekeeper. What do you call that?
He was the head watchmaker for Burlington. Or anyway, that's where they had all their timepieces serviced, was in his store.
The Suttons were prosperous, active community members, and in the early 1900s, they were considering home improvements.
There was a friend of great-grandma's that had planned on building a Frank Lloyd Wright house, having him design her house, and then she changed her mind. But great-grandma liked what she saw in the plans and liked the designs, and so she decided that that was what she wanted to do.
In 1901, the Ladies' Home Journal published a series of modern home plans by a groundbreaking American architect named Frank Lloyd Wright. Wright was hailed for designing buildings that were in harmony with nature. In 1905, the Suttons commissioned Wright to design their new home. And even though she only had a basic education, Elizabeth took on the task of corresponding with Wright.
Yes, she was educated, but when you read her letters, misspellings, her sentence structure, things like that, you can tell she just had the rudimentary education that a girl would have had back in 18 whatever. She knew what she wanted, and she
was going to get it.
Gonna get it.
And that's one of the reasons why we have the letters, is because what we think is she wrote her letters longhand in what she wanted to say, and then I think she recopied them to send and cleaned up whatever needed to be fixed.
The letters between Elizabeth and Frank Lloyd Wright provide a window into their relationship.
In the information when we were researching this, says apparently in about September of 1907, Wright had the audacity to ask for payment for the work that had already been done by himself and his office. The exorbitant fee was $300. Granny Cricket was quick to respond, and she said that a house on the ground, not on paper, and we're not spending more than $5,000. That her husband is not writing a check for it, that they just have a hole in the ground, and he's disgusted with it.
Elizabeth also took on the role of contractor. Following Wright's build book, she ordered the building materials, hired all the subcontractors, and supervised their work. Without consulting him, she made small modifications to Wright's designs. And in 1908, construction on the Sutton house was complete.
Great-grandma did not follow his designs exactly as he designed. He came to visit one time. He always wore a cape, and according to my father, said that he came in and he took one look around and said it was an abomination of his work, and threw his cape over and left, and that was it.
In the 1930s, a house fire destroyed a portion of the home.
When the fire went through, it burned the beams off that held the porch up.
Wright's trademark cantilevered porch wasn't the only loss.
The house burned during Prohibition. As the whiskey bottles blew up in the attic, the tears really rolled. That was according to my aunt.
Elizabeth and Harvey lived in their home until their deaths in 1952. Their home passed to their son, the grandfather of Harv, Patty, and Stephanie.
That's where we all went for Christmas. Uncles, aunts, cousins, we all stayed in the house.
In 1960, the Sutton house was put up for sale and purchased by a local doctor, who turned it into a small hospital. The doctor enclosed the property with a concrete fence and installed several fish ponds. When he retired, the Sutton house, now the shadow of Frank Lloyd Wright's vision, went up for sale where it sat on the market so long, the doctor considered demolishing it.
Don and Mary Poor bought the house from the doctor when it was a clinic.
In 1978, at the 11th hour, the Sutton house was purchased by a McCook couple, Don and Mary Poor.
And it was all chopped up into all these little rooms and all these little hallways, and it had an operating room and an x-ray room. And I'm not sure how many people would have had the vision at that point to what this house had been and could be. And Don and Mary stepped in, bought the house, and with their son Tom, worked on the restoration for 10 years. So I really think they need to be credited with saving the house.
Though the Poors saved the Sutton house from demolition and turned it back into a home, it was Janet and Van Carell who restored it to Frank Lloyd Wright's vision.
When we came on board, there was another owner in between. It was never about us owning the house or what we could do. It was always about the house. It's an important historical part of this community, and it needed to be saved and restored, and we were just fortunate enough to be able to do that.
The Carells bought the Sutton house in the early 1990s, but the inspiration to restore their home came several years later while touring Frank Lloyd Wright buildings in Chicago.
For me, certainly, it was like, oh, this really is a bigger deal than maybe I even realized. This house is really significant. We also contracted with an architect back there whose name is John Thorpe, and he's an expert on Frank Lloyd Wright. He came out to the house shortly after we got back and looked over the project and agreed to be our architect. So we worked with the experts because we wanted to do it right, correctly right, you know. So.
Construction began in May of 1999.
As far as the construction part of it, she was heavily involved in that, and I was at work most of the time.
His business was being totally renovated and built onto at the same time, so our life was construction. We lived here as the house was restored. All the people that we used on the restoration were McCook people, McCook businesses, because we felt it was important to the community that we use local people rather than bring people in for the restoration.
The house was stripped down to the studs and rebuilt from the inside out. 7,200 feet of quarter-sawn oak installed, the stained glass windows based on the original designs remade, and the beams that held the cantilevered porch roof replaced.
This house had those big columns holding up the front porch roof after the fire in the 30s. And so this was all tarped off, and the days it was kind of like an unveiling, and they dropped the tarp off the cantilever, and it was like, that is awesome. You know, it was just amazing to see that roof just hang there.
The single most memorable moment for me would be when the restoration was complete. The last nail was driven in September of 2001.
The restoration's completion also brought some unexpected attention.
Some ladies were peering in the window. They were up like this, peering in the dining room window. And so I just walked out the back door and I walked around and I said, "Can I help you?" Oh, they about jumped out of their skin. I said, "You mean you live here?" And I said, "Yeah, really." So there's a lot of fun stories like that, and you meet a lot of neat people.
But I would say all in all, people are very respectful.
Yeah.
They respect your privacy.
100 years after Wright designed the Sutton house, it's still a home that works for a modern family.
Well, there are just so many unique features. You're just surrounded by comfort, in my opinion, and there's so many places that you can rest in the evening, read, or whatever you want to do. You can go to a different location in the house every night for several nights, and you're never in the same spot, so you don't get bored. There's plenty of interesting things to appreciate, look at, understand.
It's just the whole philosophy he had about bringing the outside in and living with the environment in and out. It really is a kind of an amazing way to live.
After all their work to restore the Sutton House, the Corrells have taken steps to ensure its future.
We've made arrangements so that the house in perpetuity will be in its present form. With this effort, we need to preserve this. And so that's pretty well taken care of.
I'm very grateful that we were able to do this, that Van got on board with my crazy ideas. Yeah, I'm a very lucky person.